As a leader, your job is to find ways to stay in control, but without being the controller. Everyone is trying to shave off milliseconds of the lap times of these cars. Everyone is just focused on finding marginal gains every day. The question shouldn't be, is it perfect for myself? The question is it safe to try? The strategy should be based on an understanding of what you need to do to overcome the obstacles to success. For some reason, by default, think in hierarchical principles. One person needs to be the leader, otherwise it will never work.
What's the secret weapon behind every top CEO and entrepreneur? A game-changing executive assistant. Hermessi gives you access to elite EAs who supercharge your productivity. From payroll and admin to social media and customer support, they handle it all so you can focus on growth and big picture decisions. These aren't your average assistants. They're expertly trained, thoroughly screened, and equipped with the latest AI tools to work smarter and faster. Ready to delegate and dominate? Get 15% off your first 2 months with code INSPIRE15. Don't wait. Visit Hermessi, that's HERMESSI.com, and take back your time today. Welcome back to Inspired by Success. I'm your host, Linda Vo. Imagine if your business could operate with the precision and speed of a Formula One team, making swift decisions and eliminating all the slowdowns that hold companies back. Today's guest has helped organizations worldwide do just that, cutting out wasted time, outdated practices, and building agile teams that thrive on autonomy and speed. He's a visionary leader, an author, and a true disruptor in modern management. If you're ready to discover what it takes to create a business built for the future, stay tuned for an eye-opening conversation with today's guest. He's the author of Formula X and Unblock, and he's here to share why the traditional playbook for business success might be your biggest roadblock. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Jurriaan Kamer to the show.
Thank you, Linda. I'm really excited to be here.
Can you share a bit about your journey and what led you to challenge the normal traditional ways of running a business?
Yeah, so I have an IT background. So I started my career as a software engineer, as a computer tinkerer, and been really fascinated by technology. But over time, I was able to get into management roles and was asked to project manage larger IT departments. And so I started becoming more fascinated with human problems and organizational problems. So how do you get large groups of people and multiple teams to work together and to build something that is more than the sum of its parts? That started to fascinate me, and I started to study organizations that are doing it really well. So fast-moving, innovative companies. And I discovered that especially the newer digital companies are just built on fundamentally different principles. And then over time, I started to apply those principles to more traditional businesses and also outside of IT, trying to help executive teams all across the world to adopt those ideas.
Nice. And you compare business to Formula One racing. What clicked when you first made that connection?
Yeah, so I was watching Formula One for many years, as a fan, as a spectator. Nothing special going on. Just on every Sunday, I was watching the races and sometimes going to the tracks. But I was at one point invited to go and take a look behind the scenes at the Red Bull racing team in the factory in the UK. And what I saw there just completely blew my mind. It was the first time I had a sense of the scale of these teams. So they employ over 1,000 people, the size of their factory. It's like a high-end manufacturing company at scale. And these 1,000 people, they are trying together build one car that is trying to outperform the competition. They have lots of organizational challenges, and they just have found a way to be ruthlessly innovative in an extremely competitive environment.
What are some of the key learnings that you've used from there and seeing that into helping your experience with business and other organizations as well?
Yeah, there's a couple things that are just interesting in how they operate. It's mostly their environment that dictates this, because everyone is trying to shave off milliseconds and hundreds of seconds of the lap times of these cars. Everyone is just focused on finding marginal gains every day. And so everything is all about improvement. And that in itself is not different than business, but they have built in rhythms of learning and reflection to make sure that everything they do is inspected and is evaluated and then is optimized. So rather than in typical businesses, when you have an important project or you just launched a new product, maybe you'll take the time to sit down and reflect on what went well and what didn't go well. But most of the time that only happens when something blows up. And then it's mostly about, okay, what just happened and how can we make sure that never happens again? And we introduce rules and processes to do that. But even if a team is super successful and they're winning races, they go and sit down after the race to figure out, why is it that we have won? What can we learn from what we did? What were the mistakes that our competitors were making? And how can we be even better next time? These reflection moments, they take up more time than the actual race. So the races are about 90 minutes and the race debrief are over 2 hours, and they go through a detailed checklist. It's also built in, so it's not something that they have to plan. It's not like, oh, it feels like we now, it's good time to maybe go and reflect and talk and give each other feedback and stuff. No, that's already built in. It's on the calendar. It's non-negotiable. It's just how they operate. And this not only happens after the race, it happens at every level of the organization. So in manufacturing, when they do pit stop practice, like everything is all about reflecting and improving, shaving off milliseconds.
Wow. Do you think it's best to do that after each event, or should we as a company be doing that? Like, how often should people be doing that in their organizations? Like, some people wait till every quarter to reflect and do those goals and set things. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think every quarter is too long of a time frame, honestly. It depends a little on the speed of your organization and your environment. But I would say it's healthy for a team to put 1 hour in the calendar every month to sit down and talk and reflect and improve. It's often not prioritized because it feels like it's not productive, right? We're not producing anything, we're not working, and we probably could spend that hour on something else. But honestly, the things that come out of there often saves us many of hours. Sometimes it's an agreement we can make with each other to just become more effective, or it creates some clarity, or it's a metaphor of emptying the bucket, right? So frustrations if you're collaborating with other humans, you'll be frustrated about things. That is just human nature. And if you have a moment on the schedule where you can empty the bucket and just put things on the table, it just prevents bigger frustrations from building up. It also allows teams to spot smaller things that are starting to grow and become a problem, spot them earlier and address them earlier. So even though it doesn't feel like it's productive, it will save you a lot of time further down the line.
I like that. I think you can apply that even in a small business. You could still apply that concept as well, just to sit down and reflect each month.
Yeah.
Regardless of the company size. I think, yes, people, have too many meetings that aren't productive, but I think sitting back and reflecting on things that worked and what did work and what you could do more of is definitely going to be beneficial as well. So like when you were speaking about that, and even though you've done it and you've seen it in big organization, I'm already thinking of how I can apply that for my team as well, because yes, you're right. Sometimes we do just keep going every month. You just don't think, until the end of the year. Well, we've only got a small team, but I think it's definitely worth considering, even if it's just a half an hour every month just to reflect. I think that's great. So thank you for that. Now let's talk about speed and success, because you've seen fast companies crash and slow companies stagnate. What's your secret recipe for sustainable business growth that's not too fast, they've scaled too fast, or, when there's big organization that has too much red tape and politics, that they just stagnate and die slowly. So what's your secret recipe for sustainable business growth?
Yeah, I think the capability that many organizations are missing is the capability to constantly evolve their organizational system. We do these big reorgs, like these big shocks to the system often, right? So maybe a new leader comes in and they look around and like, we just have to do a reorganization. We just create a new org chart, get everybody to apply to the new roles and get rid of some waste. Those are painful restructurings, right? It causes lots of emotional damage and trauma potentially. On paper, they always look great, but in reality, they often take a long time to actually get working, and the design and the reality always doesn't match. So instead of doing these big reorgs, the thing that highly successful companies do that don't crash when they're going too fast and they don't go still if they're growing too big is to be constantly making small adjustments to how the organization functions. Sometimes that is structure. It's about, different roles, different people, moving things around. But it's all about doing small iterations and small changes, and be always on the lookout of what could we improve? How do we work together? So like I said, it's more about working on the system than in the system, right? We can be super busy as leaders to constantly be in the work and doing the work and being the expert and having all the answers. But it's actually more valuable, especially if you grow, to step back a little bit and observe, how is the organization functioning? Are people able to do the right thing every day without me being involved? And if not, what is it that I can do to optimize how the organizational system functions? So if you do that, if you're growing fast, you'll be able to introduce the right systems and processes early on, maybe some guardrails, maybe to create some clarity, to reduce some noise, to create some more focus. Those are the things you can introduce before crashing. And if you're a really large company, it allows you to observe all the processes and practices that we've been doing. And that includes meetings that are just on the calendar and nobody ever reconsiders them. Or it's maybe a process that you have to follow or a role. And those things are often introduced for a good reason, right? Somebody thought of, well, let's introduce this monthly meeting and just put a name on it and invite a bunch of people. But it's much harder to go back and say, you know what, do we still need that thing? Like, is it serving any purpose? Can we rethink that idea? Can we rethink how we are structuring or how we're collaborating with other departments? So it's all about finding all those small moves. As I always say, it's like everybody in the end is an organizational designer. If you're a leader, you must become one to create sustainable growth.
I like that. Very good tips too. In your book, Unblock, you talk about companies getting stuck in their own success. What's the biggest mental barrier you've seen successful leaders run into?
There's definitely something around dichotomy of wanting to give people lots of decision-making power and autonomy, but also wanting people to align. And in the book, I talk about this concept of aligned autonomy, where it's not a dichotomy. It's not either we have autonomy or we have alignment. You can actually have both, and I think people should strive to have both. Some of the most successful companies out there are built on the concepts of having highly autonomous teams that can decide every day what to do and how to do it, and what goals to perceive even, combined with a high level of alignment, where people are aware of what the strategy is, they are aware of what the objectives are, and together with each other, they constantly try to optimize and contribute to the higher overarching goal. If you have both and build your company on those principles, you can deal with complexity. You can go fast because people are using their thinking power and they don't have to ask for permission for everything. And at the same time, you can create this value where the sum of all parts is bigger than the individuals. So it's like you're able to achieve things that wouldn't be possible if you wouldn't be collaborating at scale. And like Formula One teams are built on that idea, as an example. Like, so if you're working on the gearbox of the car or you're working on the electronics, nobody is going to tell you exactly what to do and what is next on the priority list. Like, you're going to figure that out as experts. You're going to be constantly be on the lookout on achieving those improvements. However, every week, the whole team, the whole factory comes together to talk about where are we at? Like, what is going on in our world? Like, what is currently the most important thing to solve? What is our bottleneck across these teams? When people have a good idea and they want to maybe ask another team to do something, they already know that if that's a good thing to do or not. Do we have to leave that team alone so they can solve a super important problem right now? Or is it actually very valuable to get these 2 or 3 teams together? And they organize that among each other. It's not that managers are constantly directing that as an orchestra conductor. So
you mentioned companies, right, that are doing it right. Can you name a few companies that you think are doing such a great job in terms of the leadership, in terms of agility and innovating at the same time as well? Can you share some companies that you think are doing a great job?
So when I started to be interested in this work, I first became really interested in the famous Silicon Valley type companies. So I started looking at how Google operates, how Facebook operates. I also spent a lot of time within Spotify early on because they are famous for organizing with this idea of aligned autonomy. Obviously, all of these companies, they are in certain areas really good and certain areas pretty bad. So it's like when you're growing and only the famous things come out, or either that's a good stories or bad stories. So it's hard to say like where is it actually super good. But over time, I found examples in all sorts of industries. So we've been helping pharmaceutical companies create, the COVID vaccines at speed. That's an example of a factory that has just been able to overcome any bureaucratic hurdles and just get the expert together and get them to do the thing they need to do immediately. But it's also agriculture companies or it is financial companies. There's examples in every industry, basically. The example I'm currently following is actually a Chinese company. They are called Haier. And Haier is a Chinese white good manufacturer, so appliance manufacturer, so fridges, washing machines, dishwashers, those kind of things. They are a dinosaur of a company, over 100,000 people, but they're organized in 4,000 self-managing micro enterprises. And there's like small teams that have full P&L responsibility and always have a customer in mind. That's a pioneering company, and there's a couple of companies that are following their example right now. But yeah, the management is currently being reinvented, and we shouldn't be just sticking to the old ways because we think that's great. The ways of working that we have in our company were invented when we were still making pins in a factory over 100 years ago.
Yeah, I've seen it myself in companies that just have way too much politics, way too many bureaucracy and too many red flags. And they always have to rely on this like for one, it was in a media company, it was print, and I knew print was dying, but it was just like so much red tape. Like they didn't last because they got bought out. But if they did what you said, like having small groups and just innovating, it was just so much red tapes and politics. They've been around for a long, long time. It was the Sydney Morning Herald. It's a really famous newspaper, Fairfax Media. Sorry, it's a media company. But yeah, I could see the demise already because I knew the politics is just getting in the way of innovation, and there was no in it. Like there was innovation, but it was just too slow. And I think they feared, like there was so much fear around growth and making changes. In the end, that fear is just what destroyed it was just, I shouldn't say destroyed it. Like they got bought out, and then eventually they innovated. But it was just, I think, to avoid going down and being bought out, they could have just innovated from within and just moved with the times. I think, getting a lot of collaboration from everybody. And I think that's in leadership too, though. That's on the leadership role as well. But
Exactly,
let's talk about like a lot of the leaders these days, sometimes in the old bureaucratic ways, they fear losing control. And that's what happens as well. That I think that, losing control, because a lot of their profit came from print, like I think 80%. And I knew print was going to die. Digital was coming in, and they didn't evolve fast enough anyway. But what's your advice for leaders that fear losing control? How do you help them let go of all that fear and so that they can thrive and innovate?
As a leader, your job is to find ways to stay in control, but without being the controller. The metaphor I often use is you're either the traffic cop, on the intersection when the traffic lights are off, you go left, you go right, you stop, being so deeply involved in being in control because you're directing traffic basically. And instead, I encourage leaders to become road designers, the architect of how the road system works. Maybe you put in a roundabout instead of a traffic light, or maybe you change an intersection so things flow better. And that's still a way to be in control. Like you can still have a lot of control if you are able to set the boundaries that the system needs to thrive. You can have a lot of control by, for example, creating transparency. So a challenge in bigger organizations, there's often information hoarding, or things are just opaque. You don't know what is going on. You don't know what the other teams are doing. So you have to schedule meetings and meetings and meetings to find out and trying to influence that. But instead, if you organize with a lot of transparency, and that's a basic principle, teams can align among each other. And as a leader, you still have full insight into what is going on. So that means you can actually prioritize where you actually can make a difference. Where are you going to go and have a conversation, because what you're seeing is not what you have in mind. So that's one thing. The other thing is to just acknowledge that if you're going to make a change, people don't do it because they have the fear of losing control. At the same time, they have a sense of control that doesn't exist. So the other thing about control is that leaders often don't want to make changes because they have the fear of losing control. At the same time, at the moment, they have an illusion of control. So they think they are in control, but are they really? Like, are you able to control what is happening? It's just a fact of human nature that if you have a group of people, that you cannot be able to predict exactly what's going to happen. Even if you're going to try really hard, making plannings and trying to follow milestones and stuff, the world is an unpredictable place. So you have to just become really good at dealing with that in a way that is compatible with that, which means like it's more about doing stuff, observing what works, making adjustments, be continuously steering rather than being obsessed by creating an annual plan and just following the plan meticulously. So I think there's a couple of things there that leaders can do to have the fear of losing control and overcome it.
You talk about unlearning is important as learning. What did you have to unlearn to get to where you are? Or have you seen an example of a leader that had to unlearn something because they've made a huge, expensive mistake?
Yeah, so as a founder of a consultancy, I am definitely very involved in everything that happens. And I have a very high standard for myself, and I sometimes project that standard on others as well. Over the years, I've been called a perfectionist, and I acknowledge that I am in certain areas. And what has really helped me is this idea of when somebody is presenting a product and I have to give, for example, my okay to say, let's launch it. Maybe it's an article or maybe it's an SOW we're sending to a client. The question shouldn't be like, is it perfect for myself? But the question is it safe to try? So is it safe enough that I can consent with it and I'm not worried about actual damage? And I don't need to make it perfect in order for it to be good enough for now and safe enough to try. And it's also a question we use a lot with our clients to help overcome analysis paralysis and the lag of perfection.
If you could write a letter to every entrepreneur hitting a wall right now, what would it say?
Depends on what the wall is. I think there's also, if you look at the Unblock book, it's about overcoming obstacles, but not everybody has exactly same problems. So the thing I really invite people to do is, what are some things that are really bothering you and are really holding your organization back from achieving success? And try one thing to overcome it. Look at organizational practices, look at other examples of how people are dealing with it, pick a thing and start making changes. Because the moment you start making small changes and become really good at it, you over time build momentum for bigger changes and bigger improvements. But it's all about taking that first step and finding the first thing that you really want to improve in how your team and organization works.
Do you have any like books that you've read that have helped you get all this knowledge and insight that have really helped with your business as well and helping other businesses grow? Like, which books have made a huge impact for you?
And I'm peeking at my bookshelf over here. There's a lot of good books. The first book that I think is interesting and is pretty recent is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt. And that's a book about the difference between strategies that look like a to-do list and a plan, and strategies that are actually a strategy, meaning they are a response to challenges and how to overcome them. So often leaders are frustrated that their strategy is not coming to life, but sometimes the strategy itself is the blocker to that. That's a good book about learning how to do strategy really well. The other book that comes to mind is a business fable, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. That's all about creating psychological safety in teams, creating a feedback-rich culture, and how to do it. And I think the business fable format it's a leadership fable, just like my first book, Formula X, is also a leadership fable. It's just a really good format to consume new ideas and get inspired.
In terms of strategy, right? Like before, when I was in corporate, didn't have to think about strategy. It was just following. And now, like being an entrepreneur, I don't know, like I have goals, but in terms of the strategies and how I get there, I guess for me, it's just to-do lists. That's the action plans. Is that a good way to strategize? What are your thoughts on strategy planning, and how do we become more great at devising, like coming up with great strategies that help the business grow in terms of a higher growth and not just day-to-day to-do action items? Because I set big goals for myself, but I know that some people work backwards as well from there. And I think that's a great strategy as well. But do you have any other tips on how can we become better strategizers for our business?
The strategy should be based on an understanding of what you need to do to overcome the obstacles to success. The other thing that good strategies have is that they're both inspiring and concrete. So often we look at the purpose of a company or the mission statement or the goal, and that is, could be like we're going to be the best in our market, or it could be like we're going to save world peace. Those are like very inspiring things, but they don't help person's day-to-day job. They don't tell people what they can and cannot do or should or shouldn't focus on. So you also need a strategy to be pretty concrete about what is it that we are going to prioritize and what is it that we're not going to prioritize. And two things really help with that. First of all, I believe we should get out of this idea that it should be an annual strategy. I think companies should try to pick a little bit longer term strategies, meaning 1 to 3 years.
Ready to revolutionize your content game? Meet Modern IQ, the AI tool that creates SEO optimized, plagiarism free blog posts with just one click. No more writer's block or endless hours of content creation. Generate high-quality articles that boost visibility, save time, and slash marketing costs. Whether you're a startup or an established business, this tool is your content team, marketing expert, and SEO guru in one. Click on the link in the description to claim your free article and join forward-thinking entrepreneurs who are working smarter, not harder. The future of effortless marketing is here. Are you ready to dive in?
2 to 3 years, where it's a little bit further away, because that allows you to dream bigger and be more inspiring in what you're trying to do. But it's still short enough that you can be concrete about what is the hypothesis and what are the bets we're making right now to get to that goal. The other thing that really helps is to clarify the trade-offs. I'm a huge fan of even overstatements, meaning that you're making explicit what is it you're trying to trade off for something else. So maybe your business is all about, for example, we often use the Patagonia example, the clothing brand, because that's such an easy example. Patagonia is all about prioritizing sustainability even over profit. And that means that everybody in the organization gets the permission to do the sustainable thing even over the profitable thing. And that's just their identity of their company and their strategy of becoming different than other clothing brands. But it could also be like, oh, for the next year or two, we're going to prioritize on mobile experience even over desktop experience. Or depending on what department you're in, you can set these even overstatements to clarify in our pursuit to achieve greatness. What is it that we're not going to do? And what are we willing to sacrifice so that we can actually achieve that? And those heuristics are really good for creating local decision making without the management layers needing to approve everything.
I like that. I never thought about all the companies that I've worked for. We don't really ever talk about obstacles. So that's really unique to me because it's always the goal that we're going to hit. Most of the times there's no obstacles being discussed. So that's something that you guys can think of when you're doing strategies and planning for your business growth as well, thinking about the obstacles in the way and how to overcome that. I like that. So guys, if you're finding this valuable and helpful for your company or your business, please do me a favor and hit the follow button on the podcast and hit that like and hit that subscribe because it does help the channel grow. And let me know what strategies you're implementing as well to help your business grow, because as a leader, there's so many different functionalities we have to focus on. But for me, I find it very valuable because I apply it even on a small scale. So it's fascinating for me. So when you imagine the most successful company of 2030, what does it look like to you?
First of all, it's built on this principle of aligned autonomy. Like I said earlier, it's going to have minimal, sometimes we call it minimal viable bureaucracy, not minimal viable product, but minimal viable bureaucracy, which is creating an organization that is just as lean as possible in terms of process and management layers, has enough of it to constrain energy and to focus energy and to align people to work together. So they will have self-managing teams that together create something great. And it could be anything. They will be leveraging AI in all sorts of ways, and they will be just trying to create value and collaborating really well with each other.
Do you see like common traits of a successful company in terms of leadership? Because over the years, I've seen what good leaders do and what not so good leaders do. So I've just paid attention, and I know that I've applied that in my everyday entrepreneurial journey as well. A couple of my favorite, there's only been two really, really good leaders that have done so well and like created such a great culture and a company that you feel proud to work for, like the company as well. They were giving people autonomy. And like you said, I think they did that alignment thing now that I come to think about it, but they were likable. That's another soft skill. They were just, I don't know, they were just very personable. And like one of the ad tech companies that I worked for, like he was the CEO, and on my first day he emailed me. Like he emails everyone personally to welcome them. I thought that was wow. Like coming from a big bureaucratic organization to a small tech startup, having a CEO where I never been from a big company, not one single like direct contact or email from him, and then to moving to a small ad tech company, having a CEO say welcome, you know, the first day, like personally welcome. And I thought, wow, he's amazing.
Nice.
And plus he created the best events. Like his name's Brett Wilson, by the way. He was the founder of Tube Mogul, and he created, it was just authentic. And the thing is, the mission statement that they had was really simple, but I loved it because it was like, get shit done, make shit happen, and figure shit out. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's just brilliant. And I still apply that today in my everyday life because it's just simple, you know, and it's just no formal. It's just, he made things happen, and he was such a nice leader, an amazing leader, and the culture was there. He always looked after people. We had amazing events. I think it was back in the big days of the booms in tech when things were great, even though like the pay wasn't as great, and we all knew that he made up for it in culture and looking after and making you feel like a part of a team. So long story short, I just wanted to know, what skills have you seen in people love their leaders? What are those skill sets that you've seen in companies?
The things you mentioned are really good in itself. I think to add on that, self-awareness is an important one. So knowing and going on a journey to discover your own flaws and pitfalls and being open about them, that really helps, because that means that people can be honest with you and that people don't have to put on a shield or a mask if they are talking to you. The other thing is being really good at opening up when they've made a mistake. So it's about being vulnerable and being honest to the group, because that's how you model the behavior you want to see. If you are able to go on stage and say, you know what, I thought this was going to work and it wasn't the right thing. Like, I'm sorry. And I have some new ideas. That really gives people permission to do the same in their teams and in their organization. And it creates a healthy dynamic where we're honoring our mistakes and learning from them rather than trying to put them under the rug, creating an unhealthy environment. So the best leaders are really good at understanding their personality traits and how to use them to model the behavior they want to see.
I like that. And you've helped transform organizations worldwide. What still surprises you about how humans work together?
Well, it's funny that for some reason we still, by default, think in hierarchical principles, whereas like one person needs to be the leader, otherwise it will never work, right? We tend to go back to that default. While if people in their personal lives work together, they don't actually immediately think of we need to appoint a boss, right? So if you're playing in a band, is the drummer the boss? Is the guitarist the boss? Obviously, there's a lead singer sometimes, but do we really need to appoint a manager here in order for us to collaborate? There's something weird about that just keeps coming back. And it's really built on the assumptions that we learn over time when we work in organizations. So yeah, that's something that is still on my mind often because I hear it a lot. I'm like, no, you can actually challenge that assumption and do it differently.
What's a tough truth about success that you wish someone had told you earlier?
Success is not something you can create out of thin air. It requires a lot of reps. It requires lots of periods where things are not going well, and it's part of the journey. So instead of thinking that you can actually make things happen out of thin air, the truth of the matter is it requires lots of iteration and lots of steps forward and steps backward that are just part of going forward eventually.
Yeah, it's like the journey, not the destination sometimes, especially in building
Yeah.
and learning as well. Is
Mm-hmm.
there any key messages you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think if people are interested in the world of Formula One motor racing and how to accelerate organizations, they can pick up my first book, which is a business fable, Formula X. And the other one is Unblock, which is at unblockbook.net. Both of them are on Amazon. I'm really curious what people do with it, if they can go and unblock something in their organization.
I like that. Thank you so much for your advice today. And I hope that you guys can apply it to your everyday businesses because I know that I will be, especially that obstacle part. A bit of a key takeaway. If you guys found a key takeaway, let me know in the comments below as well. Finally, if people want to follow you and find your work, where can they find you?
I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. So if you punch in my name, Jurriaan Kamer, you'll find it. I have a newsletter and I'm always open to chat. So just find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Jurriaan.
Thank you, Linda.